Hello and welcome to DDOcast episode 345, recorded on August 3rd. I'm your host Patrick. With me this week is I'm going to fly it alone again. Tried to get something going on, but kind of fell through on a couple different angles. But that's okay, there's a lot to go over, and so make it a little more my own take. What we're going to do today is I'm going to basically review Update 22. So I'm going to have find someone to do it with me, but I kind of dragged my feet and didn't really make it happen. But that's how it goes sometimes. So we'll have fun just by myself, I think. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can watch us through Google Plus Hangouts, YouTube, or from our website at DDOcast.com. DDOcast is hosted by Cyber the awesome podcast hosting network. Shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be on Saturday, August 9th, and you can stay updated by following us on social media pages or our website, DDOcast.com, with our calendar. On the podcast this week, as I said, we'll be doing an Update 22 review, kind of give you my take on how it went and what we got and how I like it, as well as I'm going to cover a bunch of changes that they are proposing to defenses, martial fighting, and paladins. There's a series of posts on that. To get started, I'll just mention that phone support will be a little limited. They've been doing, it's coming up a couple times, but they're not going to have any phone support on August 6th. There was also a time this weekend where they had to have more limited time frame of when they had phone support. DDO game servers will be brought down on Monday, August 4th. That'll be for Update 22.3. And kind of the biggest thing out of that is going to be that stacked items are going to be going into the shared bank, bag deposit box, and guild chest correctly now. That was kind of a major bug. Not really much more of an inconvenience, but it was kind of inconvenient. The other thing is that experience awarded when completing a saga will once again automatically be consumed. You won't be able to save it anymore. I have no idea if that means that the ones that you already have will apply automatically when you log in or not. But there you go. The next ones that you get certainly will. At least that's the hope. This patch came out a little fast. They didn't do anything on Lemania this time around. Really just because there was a couple of bugs, specifically the ones I mentioned that they wanted to get out as soon as they could. And that was kind of the easy news. This will cover the three big posts on changes by Severlin, kind of one of the newer devs working on kind of a lot of these bigger changes that are going on. And the first one is all about armor, PRR, MMR, and shields. And called it Armor Up was kind of this series. Just kind of a dev diary series. And you can check these out on the forums, and we'll link to them in the show notes. The first one, as I said, covered kind of defensive stuff. Basically, what they wanted to cover with this one was the new formula for PRR, the introduction of magical resistance rating, or MMR. They introduced melee and range power, but I'll cover that as part of the next one. And they're also talking about improvements to the mitigation of heavier armors. Now, a lot of this stuff was kind of stuff they already kind of introduced before. It's not anything horribly new, but basically they are changing the PRR formula. The new formula will be 100 divided by 100 plus the rating. And that's basically how much it's going to... I can't remember how the math was, but this is basically representative of how much damage you're going to take compared to how much damage you should take. And it will be... it's a little different than the formula we had currently. I don't remember off the top of my head, but the numbers are very comparable. I don't remember which one was better, but they were very comparable. It wasn't until it's not until you get into very high levels of PRR that it it kind of becomes noticeably different, and even then it's by a couple of percent at most. MMR is going to be a new attribute that is the magical equivalent to PRR. It can be increased by wearing armor, sheltering effects, and certain enhancements. The rating works on most magical effects. It will not reduce Force, Bane, and some other special effects, which is a little bit more than we had before. The mitigation rating provides a similar formula as PRR. It's actually the same formula. They're going to be buffing heavy armor. They've talked about plans for making heavier armors and shields more effective, and they want to update the latest design. Wearing armor will now provide bonus mitigation by increasing your PRR and MMR, and they kind of updated the values. Note that these are changed from what was previously announced due to the fact that the formula has changed for more mitigation for each point. If you are wearing robes or outfits, you will not get any PRR or MMR. If you have light armor, you will get 10 of each, in addition to the current bonus of 2 plus your base attack bonus divided by 2. Medium armor will get an additional 20 PRR and MMR, in addition to the 4 plus base attack bonus divided by 1.5. And the heavy armor will get 30 of both physical resistance and magical resistance if the armor has... I should mention that the magical part of this, the magical resistance that you get from all these, is only if it has enchantments, i.e. it's a magical armor. I don't think that's going to be a very big deal for most cases. We're kind of only talking about very low levels here, where that would not be the case. However, and again, the heavy armor was 30 plus the existing formula of 6 plus your base attack bonus. So it's still... the changes that they were proposing were not going to base it on base attack bonus. They basically went back to the original base attack bonus formula and just added on 10, 20, and 30 for light, medium, and heavy armor. Mithril body will be treated as light armor, and adamantine body will be treated as heavy armor. And shields will give additional physical resistance and, if enchanted, magical resistance. And what those values will be is, if it's a buckler, you won't get any. Light shields will provide 5, heavy shields 10, and tower shields 15. In addition, characters who are proficient with shields can also use the larger shields for defense against magical attacks that would normally require a reflex saving throw, instead of or in addition to using a reflex saving throw to mitigate the damage. You can deflect the damage off your shield. This is represented by increasing your physical and magical resistance rating against those types of attacks when using a shield. Note that you gain this additional mitigation whether you make your save or not. Basically, what this means is if you use a heavy shield or a tower shield against magical attacks that would normally allow a reflex saving throw, it will double your PRR and MMR values versus that attack, or that magical spell. However, you will not be able to use evasion with heavy shields or tower shields in the future. That is currently true of tower shields, but not heavy shields. They will be looking into adding light shields to kind of fill in the void that currently exists of that. There's not a lot of light shields in the game. MRR will appear on existing and future items with the sheltering effect, and all items with the sheltering effect will give an equal amount of MMR and PRR of that effect. So it will apply retroactively. Note that armor type will still limit the amount of MMR that you can have. In the future, items may offer additional sources and or MMR in addition to sheltering effects. So basically, they're going to take sheltering, which is one we have currently in the game that provides physical resistance, and they're going to tack onto it magical resistance. But they are leaving the door open for them to add one or the other. As far as the cap that I mentioned, magical resistance rating will cap. Physical resistance does not appear that they're going to cap that. which they were kind of talking about, I believe, in the previous iteration, but now it's just going to be magical resistance. And for robes or outfits, it will cap at 100, and light armor will cap at 200. Basically, the reason for that, and the reason why the kind of shield thing that they were doing that I just mentioned, is they don't want to stack the two with evasion. They want evasion to kind of hold up on its own, which it's doing quite well right now, and they want to make it more feasible to use heavy armor instead of going for evasion. So they're trying to make them kind of comparable. There are a couple of statements that were made by the devs kind of following up this posting. The intention is not to release new creatures that negate the mitigation system they put into place, which would be a good thing. There are plans, as I mentioned, to fill the void of light shields. And the reason why they don't revamp the armor class system again, instead of using this new system, is that armor class is, by its very nature, a binary defense. They want a more predictable, for the player, damage mitigation for armor. Basically, the thing with armor class is that it kind of has always worked on a scale where there's a certain amount of certain value that's just completely useless. It doesn't really provide much benefit to having, whereas on and then you have a very small range where it makes some difference, but not a whole, not necessarily as much as it could. There's a point where it tends to be a lot more effective, which in the last changes to armor class, they made much less effective because they changed the formula that made it impossible to get up to a 95% chance to not be hit, which is where you could have gotten it early in the game. So all that to say, what happens is incoming damage, if you are just using AC, is kind of unpredictable it's spiky. It doesn't really provide a reliable and predictable defense because you can't really mitigate the damage when you get hit. It's all about not getting hit, but you get hit a lot, regardless of how good your AC actually is. You're still going to get hit a bunch. So what do I think about all this? I think it's a healthy direction in terms of balance. I certainly understand the complaints that it's not very true to D&D, which is a fair critique. However, my kind of personal opinion is that ship's kind of has sailed long ago. It's pretty hard to take this game and make it that close to D&D. And the reason for that is it's a real-time game, and that's where you start getting into a lot of problems because things happen so much more quickly than they do if you're just playing pen and paper. So you get hit a lot more often. You hit things a lot more often. So certain types of defenses or weaponry kind of break down under that system. Having even said that, I was a DM for a good long while in a group where I had a constant problem where one of the characters that I played with had a very high AC, was kind of the tank, a fighter, and then there was the wizard who had absolutely no AC. And I can tell you from experience that it was very difficult to create encounters that were challenging for the fighter and made it dangerous for him to get hit, like that he had to actually fear getting hit and pummeled around a little bit. But if I did that, the problem was that the wizard was pretty much in mortal peril. If he so much as got looked at, he was going to die because he didn't have any defense. So that if a monster could hit the guy with the high AC, he could usually almost always one-shot the wizard. And the wizard had fewer defenses to combat that. And it's not, pen and paper is not like DDO. You can't just cast displacement every couple of minutes. You have a limited number of spells. particularly as I kind of push them to take fewer breaks in between quests, it got a lot harder to really achieve much of a balance. So I think balancing those will be healthy for the game. I think that it would be better for the game to have heavily armored tanks be much more viable and popular. I think variety is always good. And the reason you don't see that as much right now is because they can't compete with magical attacks. I mean, that's where the real problem is. It has a lot to do with, when you think about the endgame right now, you're fighting 3 dragons in the 2 endgame raids. And dragons have a lot of area of effect damage. So if you want your tank to be able to compete, you need to have something different than just being evasion tanks. I think having more variety in that will be good. Okay, so that's kind of where they're going with the armor and the defenses. Now it's kind of more of the new stuff. Melee ranged power, two-handed fighting feats, shield feats, and Master's Blitz. And this was the second dev diary that was going on here. So we'll start with melee power. The new attribute is essentially the melee version of spell power. Melee power will not only increase the damage of straight weapon damage, but certain static effects from enhancements will now scale up with melee power, allowing them to be more useful in epic levels. Melee power will be gained from certain enhancements and some melee epic destinies. The plans to have future loot include melee power. This rating increases melee attacks by the following formula. 100 plus your rating divided by 100. Basically very similar to how spell power works. I'm not exactly sure if that will give you the same result off the top of my head. I didn't bother doing the math and looking at the formula very much. But basically, just suffice to say that melee power will make you do more damage. As they rebalance static effects found in enhancements, they will make those scale with melee power, so they increase as you gain power and new loot. As an example, several paladin damage sources that were previously static will now scale with melee power. Range power is basically the range equivalent of melee power. It's pretty much always the same. This rating won't be used much in the first set of changes, but is a future tool for ranged builds. Basically, their concern right now is that melee is the one that's falling behind, not so much range, so they're not going to add much in the way of range power to start. These statistics, melee and range power, do not come from attributes. They come strictly from enhancements, epic levels, and epic destinies. So basically your stats are not going to make much of a difference. And that's kind of intentional and very understood. They don't want to lock melee or ranged characters into always having to increase a specific stat. And we've seen more of a departure from that to give support to, say, dexterity melee builds through the rogue enhancements that allow them to use dexterity as their damage modifier. So they don't want to undo that and kind of lock people into having a specific attribute. They will have it on future loot, although they were not horribly specific with that. Monsters will not get this power, which is probably a good thing. Otherwise, they might squish us a little better. Melee and range power are just cleaning up and defining a lot of the places and activities that increase damage by a specific percent. The game already does this. They're just clearing things up and providing the abilities, enhancements, feats to scale. That's a little hard to understand. Basically, what they're saying is they already do this. They're just giving it a slightly different numerical, or they're giving it a name. So basically what he's saying is anywhere where you see this attack does plus some amount of weapon damage or 100% extra damage, such as adrenaline or Master's Blitz. Technically, it's the same thing. It's just not called melee power. They can and will add melee power according to static effects that, as you say, do 1 to 10 acid force whenever damage, as we do passes on specific trees, making those abilities useful. That seems to indicate that they are going to need to do a lot of enhancement passes, because they pretty much have to go through anything related to the melee classes, and certainly at least the melee classes, as well as things like the Eldritch Knight, which is kind of a hybrid or melee enhancement tree for casters. So pretty much anything that has to do with adding damage and attacks, they're going to do a lot of passes. So kind of my thoughts on melee and range power. It's good. I think if you're going to implement it, I think they're kind of going about it the right direction. It's not necessarily to say that I think they should, although I definitely recognize that it's certainly already in the game to a certain extent. But as much as they're planning on adding it to the game seems like, I don't know, I'm not entirely convinced that it's a great direction to go quite so far with adding it into the game. I think I would feel maybe a little better if it wasn't going to be a loot thing. Maybe it was just enhancements and such things. But I think that's probably not going to happen. I know there are some concerns about certain enhancement trees getting passes sooner than other ones, creating a system of imbalance for a while, which is certainly a concern. I don't think it's necessarily going to break the game or anything like that, and I'm not so much concerned about it being a big departure from D&D. However, I wouldn't say I'm a fan of it, but I'm not really opposed to it either. Okay, so some of the other things that are going on here, and I should mention that melee power and range power was explained in the first post. I kind of moved it in my own notes. So the second dev diary is about using melee power to scale epic characters, melee and epic and Master's Blitz, changes to two-handed weapon feats, and changes to shield feats. Basically, talking about Master's Blitz, there's a couple of problems with Master's Blitz. One is that it is, compared to the other Destinies, very overpowered. Pretty much every melee character is just running around in Master's Blitz. The other problem is that it's really annoying to use, to maintain, and to group with. Basically, people complain about other people taking their kills so they can't get stacks. It's very difficult to run with many or multiple people with Master's Blitz going at the same time. It can be tricky to do that. And it's also kind of a pain to charge up. Also, it's really kind of useless in a boss fight. If the boss fight has a bunch of trash, then you can get some use out of it. But if you're just fighting a boss, it's really hard to maintain a stack. It pretty much is always just going to go away after a short period of time. So it can be really hard to utilize in long duration boss fights. Basically, to summarize where they're at, they hate the mechanic of spamming tactical powers 50 times to activate the power. Since the code doesn't even require you to hit anything, this step is annoying and rather useless. They want to eliminate it, which I approve of. That certainly makes a lot of sense. They don't like the group mechanic where melee has to try and convince other characters not to kill monsters so they can build charges. They are discussing a system where this builds as the character hits opponents. They don't like that 250% damage is stacked into one tier 5 ability. Not only is this a poor leveling experience, but it overshadows the other melee-oriented destinies. They want to move some of that damage into the epic levels and core abilities so melee characters gradually build damage as you level them. They want to some other melee epic destinies to offer competitive DPS. The dodge bonus goes against heavy armor, and adding 50% dodge bonus that caps at the dodge cap is not only less than ideal, but is too limited for characters wearing heavy armor. They also want to reduce group scaling of hit points of bosses. This will reduce hit points of bosses when you group, particularly on epic. To be clear, they don't want to nerf melee. The only reason they're talking about reducing the damage of Master's Blitz is because they want to roll that damage into the epic levels and cores of the melee-oriented destinies. So, the plan is to convert the damage bonuses of Master's Blitz to 250 melee power and roll some of that into the epic levels and core abilities. And then they kind of changed the numbers that they were going to do. Let's see if I can find it really quick. Each epic level, let's see, each epic level will give 5 melee power, and each innate ability gives 5 as well for a total of 75. Blitzing itself will provide 175 melee power. That's slightly different than where they started from. Let's see, find my place again here. So basically, all of the following destinies, you will get that 5 melee power with each innate core ability. So it'll be Legendary Dreadnought, Shadow Dancer, Unyielding Sentinel, Primal Avatar, Fury of the Wild, Grandmaster of Flowers, and Divine Crusaders. There will also, let's see, as they test these changes, they can tweak individual destinies by changing melee power provided in their innate abilities, and if any particular epic destiny is doing too much melee damage, they can dial back the melee and in what they're calling the innates in the destiny, basically the core abilities of each destiny. What does this do for long-term scaling? It means that they can change static abilities such as light damage that paladins use to scale with melee power and increase substantially into the epic levels. As an example, Knight of the Chalice ability Divine Light is fine in the early heroic levels, but it gets outscaled in the later levels. By making it scale with melee power at a 2-for-1 basis, even a character with the base 150 melee power from levels and innate abilities will see an increase from 18d6 to the equivalent of 44d6 damage. That's a lot. So that gives us long-term tools to balance those abilities. The two-handed fighting feat will add 10 melee power, and improved and greater will add 5 melee power when you're wielding a two-handed weapon. And shield mastery will add 10 melee power, and improved shield mastery and improved shield bash will add an additional 5 melee power provided that you are using a shield. That's how those feats are going to change and play in with that. Now, let's see, there were, again, some kind of more comments later. They want to see how the additional melee power and the ability to use glancing blows while moving work before talking about nerfing single weapon fighting, especially since it was just released, which I say, yay, moving and glancing blows. They are saying that non-blitz melee is behind range in casting builds. Reducing monster health doesn't balance that because it doesn't do anything to the relative power of the various builds, which is what they're kind of trying to address here. If they just nerf Blitz, then melee won't have any option to build or stay competitive with good range and casting builds, so they don't want to just take it all away, they just want to kind of spread it out a little bit, so that if you're not in that destiny, that you're not losing all of your potency and capabilities. They're basically in the process of examining Master's Blitz with range attacks. For the time being, they will likely add range power to the Master's Blitz buff as well as melee power. So the range will certainly see a drop in DPS if they do indeed move a lot of the power or some of the power out of Master's Blitz, but in melee form, but don't increase it in terms of range damage. So those builds will probably see a little bit of a loss. Then they also came in and mentioned that because of the way level 20 works, they won't be able to add 5 melee power to that. If they need to, they'll roll it back into probably level 28 or 30 when the time comes, depending on how long that takes. Basically, the problem was that at level 20 is still a heroic level in terms that you take a level of a class, which basically meant that there were a lot of possibilities for where that bonus would have to come from, compared to an epic level where it's just there. There's only one kind of level at epics, and that was kind of the hindering block there. So with all that, I like that they are trying to balance relatively melee with the others. I think what I'd like to see, at least for the at least for certain areas, specifically the levels, your base epic levels, I'd like to see them add basically kind of hedging bets in the sense. I'd like to see that each of those levels add like one ranged spell power and one ranged power. And the reason why I say that is you build it in now, and then if you have to go back and balance it, you can kind of balance by adding something that already exists rather than adding it into the game. And perhaps even doing that with the different innate abilities. So say the Draconic Incarnation line and the Magister line would add one spell power to each innate ability just to kind of allow for that future use as opposed to having it later. But they can always add it in later as well. It would just take a little bit more work at those points in time. So I think it will be good for the game. Again, balance is good. The more choices we have that are viable, the better the gaming experience is going to be for everyone. Certainly, there's going to be a little bit of a hit to ranged builds that are using Master's Blitz, but I think taking a lot of that power out of Legendary Dreadnought and moving it into other areas that you can kind of take with you to other destinies will be better in the long run. So I'm kind of excited to see that. I certainly like not having to kill things necessarily to maintain your Master's Blitz stack. By taking that out, it makes that ability much more viable in the end raiding game where you're fighting a main boss and not a lot of minions. You can get away with blitzing, like one or two people blitzing in Fire Peaks and Temple of Deathworm, but if you get more than that, you really kind of run into problems. Under this proposal, you could have as many people who want to run in Legendary Dreadnought with Master's Blitz do that without it hindering each other, and I think that will definitely be a good thing for the game. And plus, it's always just nice to not have conflict over silly things like kill stealing just because you're trying to build up that blitz. Although I did kind of enjoy a little bit of the tactics that kind of came along inherently with that. Okay, and the third dev diary was about paladin changes and what they're kind of looking at to do with paladins. To start, they want to discuss changes to the Holy Sword spell as part of the ongoing discussion of paladins. They have several goals. They want to make paladin spellcasting more valuable, and they want to make this particular spell valuable when the paladin has high-end gear, and increase the effectiveness of the paladin class. So the Holy Sword spell is being redesigned to be, it'll still be self-only. It'll be 1 minute per caster level, and what it will do is channel holy power to increase the effectiveness of your equipped weapons. Weapons you are currently wielding gain an additional +2 competence bonus to enhancement value. The spell also increases the threat range and critical weapon multiplier of these weapons by 1. And additionally, it will also add +1 weapon to the weapons it enchants. So that's a pretty big boast there. The goal is to make high-level paladins fun and competitive with other melee classes and builds. As they iterate on the design, they see the total changes from armor boosts, nether chalice, cores, and paladin spells to make them more competitive and fun. That's kind of what they're looking at there. Zeal, they're going to make it, they're not really going to do anything to it other than change the duration to match the Holy Sword spell. So it'll be 1 minute per caster level, which will be pretty stinking awesome. The Knight of the Chalice, they will be doing a lot of changes to that, and I'm not really going to go over necessarily all of them. The main thing is light damage from core abilities will scale with your melee power. So that'll be pretty slick there. And let's see if I can scroll through all of that. the one thing to note is they are adding cleaves to their tree, and those kind of cleave attacks will share timers with cleave and great cleave. The reason why they're doing this is those are better than these enhancements are better than the Feats cleave and great cleave, and they want to basically free up feats for paladins so they don't have to take those feats. Now, there was some concern about this, specifically with overwhelming critical. And what they're going to do is they're actually going to take away a lot of the requirements for overwhelming critical, so that it doesn't necessarily, you don't need to take cleave and great cleave. And I'll talk about that in a second. The enhancement costs won't change if they didn't change their cost. There were a couple things where they kind of had some problems with, or made some mistakes in what they were showing, and it looked like they were going to change some of those costs. That's not the intent. That's not really what's going to be happening for the most part, unless they're functionally changing what that ability is doing. Let's see, overwhelming crit, what they are doing to that, they're going to remove both the strength requirement and the great cleave requirement from the feat, which will make it a lot more available. I have a couple of characters who will suddenly be able to take that feat, much to their enjoyment. And let's see, there was a question about, are we becoming less base in pen and paper? And Severin kind of addressed some of that. He hears you. One of the reasons they are redesigning the direction of the Paladin changes is they decided to keep those systems away from. They didn't want to go away from the core pen and paper Paladin class when they made the changes, as they were kind of expecting to do that a little bit more, and they don't. Because of player feedback in part, they don't want to do that. So that's kind of why they kind of went back on some of their changes. So the systems they are adding are just extensions of successful systems already in place, spell power and PRR. Let's see. That's kind of all the news for the week. Some bugs that's going on. They are investigating an issue where guild buff durations may be different depending on where you get the buff, and the ability to take both single weapon fighting and shield feats is a bug and should be fixed coming up. Store news: you can still get Otto's boxes through August 10th. You can also get 20% off of Lesser and True Hearts of Wood, XP potions, healing potions, and spell point potions through the 10th, and plus 20 potions of jumping 5-stack with the coupon code JUMP73. News for the week. There was no Chronicle or Twitch. Jerry was on vacation. However, DDO Gamer, Jeff, did have a post on why he thinks melee power is bad. It was a good, well-thought-out argument. We'll link to that in the show notes if you want to look at some stuff there. DDOcast news. We are still going to be popping through various servers. I've already done most of them, but I'll keep going so I hit all the servers, probably at least twice, at which point I will make it a little bit more open. What I'm doing is asking a couple of questions and preparing for another event, basically just gathering some data. So if you see me, I'll be on the character DDOcast 1 on the various servers. I'm using Twitter to kind of let people know somewhat shortly ahead of time when I'm going to be where. So you can kind of keep an eye on that. The other thing that's coming up with episode 350, what I'm going to do is be on a server and kind of have a somewhat live show. It won't be truly live, won't be broadcasting it live, but I will be recording it live for editing later. So if you would like to stop in and ask a question, say hi, just have something to say, pretty much whatever you want as long as it's respectful. we'll probably play it on the air, depending how long it goes. But I am targeting, I'm going to forget this as I didn't write it down, early September. And I'll give kind of some more specifics on when that gets nailed down. But you can kind of pay attention to our calendar. I believe, let's see, it's the first Saturday in September, and it'll be about probably 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific time is kind of when I'm thinking about doing that. Gen Con coming up, and there is going to be a hangout hosted by Sam Scribble of DDO Cocktail Hour. We'll link to a place where you can get some more information on that. That is coming up very soon in a couple of weekends here, August 14th and 17th, and PAX Prime is coming up on August 29th and September 1st. And I will probably look at hosting something here in Seattle for DDO players to meet up, and I'll let everyone know when that's coming up. If you want to be apprised of some of that stuff, feel free to follow us on Twitter. I'm probably going to be moving kind of towards using that a little bit more to make quick little announcements rather than doing both Google Plus and Facebook and Twitter. So if you want to kind of stay up to date to stuff when I'm going to announce it, Twitter is going to be the place to be. You can also follow our calendar on our website, which will show when things are happening as well as store news and bonus days news and stuff like that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do basically a review of Update 22 and what's going on there. Let's see. Where should I start? We'll start with the guild changes, the new amenities, buffs, and ships, as well as new guild levels. And I gotta say, I am really enjoying the new buffs. It definitely makes it a lot easier to play the game. You don't have to go back to the ship if you die, and every hour. Having buffs last much longer is definitely more enjoyable of an experience. I also really like the looks of it. It's a little bit cumbersome, I think, to utilize some of the aspects of the ship, such as the different vendors and the bank and mailbox and everything. You have to go below decks. You can't have it on the top deck like you used to, which is probably my only complaint. But I am very willing to take the system we have and get rid of that. I much prefer the new system, and I'm really enjoying that a lot. Epic 3 Barrel Cove. The wilderness area is very nice. I do like fighting the airships. That's a lot of fun. Explorer areas are always pretty much a really, really good job of those different areas. And I like that. I like lots of mobs that are fairly easy to kill. It makes Slayer counts very easy. And shooting ballistas is a lot of fun. As far as the quests, I have enjoyed the quests a lot. I think they're good job of epifying them. Probably my one kind of complaint is Precious Cargo, which is the capstone quest. It's a really fun concept. I think the airship battle part just kind of falls a little flat. I haven't run it a lot, but generally when I've run it, what I found is it's pretty much impossible to actually shoot the other airships out of the sky. The UI interfaces are really just too limiting, too kind of bulky and cumbersome. And really what it comes down to is it just makes more sense to essentially hide until they kind of board you, and then you can go destroy their ship and run back to your ship. I found that to be a lot more effective. So it's really just kind of waiting for your ship to get damaged and stopped, and then you kind of rinse and repeat. So I was a little disappointed by the airship combat, just in how clumpy and not very useful it was to do. As far as loot goes, I love the loot, particularly the gloves and the boots. Those were, I think, really good items, maybe a little too good, even. And I really like the cursed blade of Jack Jibbers, although I have not yet been fortunate enough to pull one. There may be a few farming runs in my future there, but I thought that was a really, really fun and unique item, and it kind of, in a way, kind of a nice little answer to some issues of lag that have been plaguing the game of late. So that's a really neat item, and I've kind of seen some really good effective use out of that. A lot of the other items are also really cool as well. They do a really good job of kind of filling some niches and some fun stuff. And that they may not all be the best of item, but they're very thematically done and interesting. And hey, what's not to like about being able to hold a ship wheel in your hand as a shield? That's a pretty slick thing that you can get there. The bag deposit box. Gotta say, that's pretty slick. I like being able to do that. I wish that you got more spaces as a start. You only get 45, and then if you upgrade it, you get like another 250. The only reason I haven't just gone out and upgraded it is pretty much because I've done without it for so long. I don't really feel a need to upgrade it right away. I'm kind of just waiting for a sale. I'm just kind of using my same system, but I've already filled my bag deposit box just with kind of the stuff that I want to be able to pass around a little bit more easily. But the drag and drop feature of your bags to fill it is really stinking awesome. I really like that. That's a really nice convenience. And I fully intend on buying up the additional slots as soon as they go on sale. Single weapon fighting and swashbuckler. I have not really done a lot with that. I did play a swashbuckler on Lemania when I did the Party Crashers walkthrough. And I did find it to be very impressive and fun. I was quite impressed by how fast they could move and swing a weapon. And I found that I was doing a very nice amount of DPS. I was pretty happy with that build. I've noticed a lot of people running swashbucklers and really enjoying that as well, so I think that's really good. I think the thing that's really kind of interesting about swashbuckler is you can kind of really go as a bard and do really well as a pure bard swashbuckling, or you can do some really interesting class combinations as you can. You only need like 5 levels to really get the full advantage of swashbuckler. You may not be a bard if you just do that. But I've seen some really interesting combinations with other classes, particularly fighter and a rogue, to really kind of utilize the swashbuckling in conjunction with those other classes and single weapon fighting. I gotta say I'm pretty impressed by how effective it was in adding it to the game. I don't know if there's really a reason to be a single weapon fighter if you're not going to be a swashbuckler. However, having said that, I was fairly skeptical of whether or not it would be very popular, and I think they did a really good job of making it popular and an enjoyable choice for bards. Regarding the Spell Singer and War Chanter changes, I think those, again, were really nice changes. I'm a little surprised at how much more powerful my bard feels now. Even though he already felt pretty good. I did not utilize single weapon fighting and swashbuckler on him other than to take the speed bonus. However, I will say that he got probably something like, what was it, 60 some odd extra healing power, and was kind of able to push him solidly past, I think he's sitting around 370 some odd healing power now, which is a lot more than he used to have, just by picking up the War Chanter kind of abilities that give you positive spell power. And I also really like the chanting aspect, so you don't have to sing several of those songs over and over again. It really kind of cuts down on the singing, and I kind of almost wish they'd do a few more of those, perhaps in the Spell Singer tree, just to kind of cut down on the singing aspect of bards. But all in all, I'd say well done, devs. Update 22 is a good update, solid in all accounts, and really been enjoying it. Lightning post this week comes from Helena. He asked, do you play DDO while recording DDOcast? Generally, no. Kind of the reason being that while I'm doing the Hangouts, which is what I normally do, and managing people, reading and talking and time managing and listening all at the same time is kind of surprisingly difficult to do all at once. So generally, no, I don't play DDO while I'm recording DDOcast. However, in interest of full disclosure, I am actually playing as I'm recording this show, which is why I might be a little bit more scatterbrained than normal. And I didn't even die, which is impressive in and of itself while playing. But no, I generally don't play DDO. I generally have enough going on while I'm recording a cast. So with that, I'll say thanks to everyone for listening to the show, and thanks to the folks that are contributing to DDOcast these days. Really appreciate those guys. Looking forward to getting perhaps a couple of new faces in here. And should have a guest next week. Kind of already got that lined up. Let's see. Thanks to Turbine and Wizards for making a fun game, and thanks to Cyberitis for hosting our podcast. You can hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, our calendar, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. If you want to be a part of the show or just say hi, you can email us at DDOcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for the latest cast updates. Our closing tip for the week comes from Seamus1. If you want to succeed and have fun, the key is in communication. Be honest and upfront with your expectations and your preferred play style. People will respond to it, and you will either find a great group and new friends, or you will know who not to group with. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your chests level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to visit Three Barrel Cove. Thanks for listening.